Hi, I'm Kitty Green. I'm the writer, director, co-editor, and producer of The Assistant.
Hi, I'm Julia Garner, and I am the actress in The Assistant, and I play Jane.
And we're going to talk about the HR scene where Jane visits her office company's HR representative. It's a 12-page scene. It's 12 pages of dialogue. And I remember being very daunted going into it because it was something that I hadn't tackled that much material before, I guess, in a day. So yeah, how did you feel, Julia? Do you remember what it was like for you?
I was really nervous because I feel like when we everything was kind of leading up to that day and that scene and everything that we talked about even weeks ahead, everything, all the little scenes were leading up to that big scene. So it was super intimidating, but at the same time, it was super exciting. Um, it was exciting in the sense where it like could have gone like really good or like really bad. The only thing that I felt really good about was that we worked so much around it. Like we really prepared for it. And on the day, that's what I love. I love shooting really long scenes because it feels like a play. It's like you just you can't get out of the moment in a way. And we didn't really cut, like we did from beginning to end, like almost pretty much every time.
Yeah. How do you prepare? Like, how do you learn that many lines? Like, how do you prepare? I don't understand your process. Like, what do you, like, how do you remember all that?
I don't, I'm like, I don't know. I you just need to get everything ahead of time, I feel like, and then you need to prioritize like what scenes are closer to like what days like you're shooting closer to like the days of shooting it. But I feel like a lot of it is also not just line wise to prepare, but also just emotionally, you know, planning out every beat, every line, especially with the HR scene. Especially that scene had like a different there was different subtext behind every line. um that like one hand she was speaking but the like really being open, but the other hand she wasn't fully being open because she was obviously she picked up quickly that she couldn't be really honest with Matthew's character in the HR. um
What's, Matthew is amazing.
Matthew is amazing. How did you like cast Matthew or think about Matthew? I mean, I've been a fan of his forever, but like, what did you think of Matthew?
It's interesting. Like I mean, I was a fan of his from his kind of British films.
Yeah, of course, Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, I have Succession, which is sort of now a lot of people are making that comparison between his character in Succession and this character. And
I think his characters in those, I think him and the assistant and him in Succession are completely different. You just think maybe it's the same because it's an office.
yeah, an American accent maybe
Yeah.
too, or something. But like we were looking, I mean, honestly, the first draft, the character was really mean and really angry and swore a lot, and it was a lot of kind of bluster and like force. And it felt, as I was kept kind of drafting it and kept figuring out what it would be, it kind of felt more insidious the more kind of calm and rational and reasonable he was. This idea that he kind of bring her in, like trying to like kind of using his charm and sort of smiles and encouragement to kind of reel her in before he kind of goes in for the kill, essentially. So that his name came up and I thought, oh, that would be wonderful. And so it was kind of a no-brainer as soon as somebody brought him up as an idea. It's just like, oh, he would be perfect. And he sort of got that ability to play kind of something really evil, really creepy, but also very charming, very, very handsome.
Very likable.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes the HR very conflicting is that you have somebody that is like the man who's playing, the HR guy, like he is likable and you're kind of like, but at the same time, you're just like, oh, he's so dismissive. It's like so painful to watch. I mean, it was painful to experience. Like, there was a certain point when we were shooting that scene where I was like, this is an awful feeling. It's awful. You know, that's the hardest part of, you know, I guess being an actor is like, you start really feeling all of, like, all those feelings are like, even though I'm not Jane, but all my emotions are mine and I'm using that for the characters that I'm playing. So I was feeling like that, you know, when that HR scene was happening, and it was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah, but you know, it's a really well written scene. So
I mean, you guys were so good. I must say, I think we designed it so we would shoot it in blocks. Like we cut it up so we'd shoot like this section first and this section first. And then I think on the first take, you were so good and you both just kept going and I didn't want to cut. And I think from then on, we kept shooting the thing in its entirety, like the entire kind of 12 minutes. And like, was that tiring for you? Like, it was incredible for us.
We had a rehearsal a little bit before, remember, that we talked about, and that was like the first time that I met Matthew. So I was nervous about that, but we had a lot of time to talk about this, that day, you know, weeks ahead. But it was building up. I was like, oh my God, I hope like all this talk is going to be like, what I'm going to do is going to be like worth it. But, you know, I wanted to ask you, you know, because the writing, you know, obviously writing makes my job a little easier, you know, when the writing is good. And you were saying, oh, how did you memorize the lines? And it's like, well, when the writing is good, it's much easier to remember lines because the dialogue is really good. You know, that's how I always know when dialogue's really good. What was the writing process for that scene, and just the writing process in general with the whole movie, that, you know, everything was building, and just that one scene? Did you feel like there was a lot of pressure with that one scene because it was almost like a silent movie and like everything kind of was boiling down to that one scene?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of dialogue in any of the other scenes really. So I remember this was it felt unique in the screenplay in that it was this kind of a big page count and it was very different into the way it was kind of written. And it also, so then it kind of gave us an opportunity when we were shooting it to be a little unique formally. Like we kind of changed the sort of visual style, I guess. It kind of broke with the visual style for that scene and kind of let the two of you lead it. And it became kind of more performance driven than, say, visually stylistic in some senses. But I think writing it was interesting. It was something where I was chatting to a lot of young women in the research phase of this film who worked at different companies, a lot of women from production companies, but also from other industries like tech and engineering and things like that, who spoke to me about trying to speak up about their workplaces, about the bad behavior, about sort of toxic, work environments, and finding they were shut down by their HR department. And so I was specifically looking to put in something about the fact that the HR department is there to protect the company and not the employees. And so his job was to protect his boss, and he's just doing his job in that scene, which is even more terrifying. But also to use it as an example of gaslighting. I mean, she comes in with some idea about what happened. She's sort of boiled over at this point. It's been kind of brewing, and like her tension is kind of building throughout that entire first sort of 40 minutes of the movie. And this is the point where it kind of boils over and she's ready to say, like, speak her mind. And he just makes her doubt herself, confused. She leaves rattled, confused. She doesn't even know if
she feels worse. She feels actually worse when she came in. Like she feels worse when she got out instead of like when she came in.
Exactly. She's almost
that's how I felt when I was shooting the project. Was it, obviously like with writing, was it after that scene that you wrote the HR scene, did you feel that, like you felt worse going out writing after that scene and then writing the scene after it? Like, what was the process? Like, did you feel more alone and isolated? Because already writing is such an isolating feeling. Like, how did you feel after?
That's an interesting one. I feel like that scene was never, I almost wrote the entire movie and then had that as like a placeholder and said like HR scene, where she goes, she knows, she brings up the way I describe it is like she's got the dots, but she can't join them. She can't like join the dots. Essentially, she can't prove that she's seen anything. She doesn't have any kind of evidence, essentially. So I knew that what I wanted to happen in that scene, it was the last thing to write. So I wrote everything else, and then kind of figured out over a few weeks. I think it was actually Christmas a couple of years ago where I figured out like kind of how that would play. And it took just a lot of different, like playing around with different styles, figuring out who he was, how kind of it's his charm and how insidious it was that he is kind of asking you about your dreams and hopes and kind of using your career ambition against you, going, well, if you want this, you know, you're throwing it all away by being here. You know, it's kind of really insidious and really devastating.
And convincing her.
Yeah.
In a way too.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the process wasn't that difficult. It was kind of just figuring out, and there's a few like moments I call like punctuation moments, like when he takes that call, he kind of takes that call because he knows at that point that you don't have enough evidence, that you don't have anything on him. So he can kind of laugh about the ranges on the phone. And then there's the tissue box moment, which is just so horrific.
I don't remember, that was scripted, but it became like when we were shooting, it became more of a moment when we were shooting, I feel like, right?
That steel tissue box was so loud, so it became
so loud, and it became more cringy. And I think there was one take where Matthew, like it was really loud, so it was just like, and then all of a sudden it was like, is he really giving me a tissue? I don't want to. It felt like, I remember shooting it. It felt like I don't want to take anything from this man. Like, I don't even want to take a tissue that he's offering, even though I really want to take it, because like I am, crying a river right now.
But it's also so demeaning. I think you actually weren't crying at the point he pushes it too late, you know, and it's so
or something. Just like he's like, oh, the woman's crying.
Exactly. It's so awful. But yeah, I think it was those kind of moments helped the edit as well in terms of a flow of it. It's a very long scene, and it was able to kind of reboots. I think at those 2 points, and you guys are incredible. So that helps a lot too.
Was there a lot of like scenes to, because there was such a long takes, was it really hard to cut around it, or was it just kind of easier? I mean, I don't know anything about editing, and obviously like you have, your background is in documentary, and I always say like a really great documentary filmmaker or editor is like almost like, it's like a film, editing is so important in documentary, I feel like. So how was it cut that scene?
It was it wasn't difficult to cut because the performances were so good. Like, you two were so incredible that, I mean, my biggest problem was every time I would watch the footage, I would just get lost in it, just watching your face, and I would forget kind of where I should put the edit points, and because I'd just be sort of transported by what was going on, which was incredible. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on your face, which I wanted to chat to you about, because it is that kind of struggle of like all the things she's holding back. She can't say, I mean, it's an office environment, so she's not going to scream and yell and cry. So that kind of internal struggle to me was really interesting, and me trying to get that right, so that we did your performance justice, where we used the right takes and we kind of cut it together in a way that made that, gave that trajectory, that emotional trajectory kind of resonance. I wanted to ask you about that, how you felt about that character, like that, how you play that.
I remember when we first met up, like you said, you really wanted it to be a quiet film, the whole thing, not just like on the page, but just the whole feel of it, like not even much music, and have just the tension being so loud. And I totally agreed with that, because everything was in that HR scene that needed to be said. And if everything else was quiet, that HR scene was going to be even louder in a way. And I, really isolating the audience, separating the audience and separating the people around Jane. I really wanted to keep it separate. So like the audience was almost like how Jane felt, or her feelings in a way, and that it was only like from Jane's perspective, and kind of going with what you were saying, just having it be a really quiet film and not just keeping, so they felt isolated too. I felt like it would be really powerful to have the movie just be a really isolating experience for everyone, that like even though people were sitting in the movie theater, I wanted like together, I wanted them to like feel isolated even from each other, even if there were, you know what I mean, just that whole isolating experience. But yeah, I guess it's you know, and I guess with the HR scene, I think too, like, you know, us working on the different subtexts of every line, behind every line, there's a different subtext. I think that's where subtext is so important, because I could say something that's written on the page, but really, I really want to say something else, but I just don't know how. And that's where subtext is so handy and so important with a scene like that, because I might be saying something to Matthew's character, but really the subtext, there's a line behind the line, and I'm not saying it. So you always feel like you're wanting more from that character. You're like, you're like on the edge of your seat in a way. Like, why isn't she, there's something else, you know? And that makes it even more heartbreaking when he does gaslight her, because she doesn't know how to articulate what she's truly thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's that kind of relationship with you and Christine's character, and like this waitress who comes in, and this idea that you're saying she's a waitress, and he's accusing you of almost not respecting her enough. Like, what, you think she doesn't have enough experience because she's a waitress? Like,
Or
kind
just, you know, making it that are you jealous at her? That's also another thing. And then, you know, she probably double thinks like, maybe I am jealous at her and I wasn't even aware of it. So it's not just that one thing like, oh yeah, I was really worried about her. I mean, it's so many different things, you know. That's where, like, again, subtext, like, you know, and that's what this scene had. It made it so much easy. Like, the writing was so good. It just made it easy to pick like a subtext in a way, like work around that.
Yeah, I mean, you were such a pleasure to work with. It was so wonderful. So thank you so much for being a part of this film. It's been such a wonderful experience.
Thank you so much. And you know how much I love you. And like, I'm just waiting for the next thing we'll do together, you know, like we'll know each other for a long time.
I hope so. I would love that.
Yes. Thank you for watching this. I hope that you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed making this film.